I did Caesar's Hour. That was a wonderful gig. I had, again, I was hired not as the announcer. They had an announcer. They had other people doing commercials. I was hired because Sid Caesar was so pathologically shy that I've talked to him about this since, that he could not, as long as he was behind a mask of some kind, did those wonderful characters that he did. He was very extroverted. But to come out at the beginning and say, good evening, I'm Sid Caesar, and tonight on our program, it just almost killed him. Worse than I was in my early days of radio. So they finally decided it was so tough on Sid that they'd get somebody to do that for him, and that's what I did. And I was, and they had another announcer who did the off camera, you know, the voiceover. But I was on camera doing that. I got to engage in some of the skits that they did, you know, with marvelous people like Howie Morris and Carl Reiner. I was going to say Bob Reiner's father. And writers, you know, like Mel Brooks, and it was a great era.
Did you perform in those skits as Hugh Downs or as a character?
No, as some we did a takeoff once on one of the nightly drama, the weekly drama things, like Hallmark Hall of Fame or something, and where I came out and on camera announced with great pomp that the program, and I'll turn you over to your host, so-and-so, a made-up name, and Carl Reiner would come out and do the same thing and turn you over to your anchor, so-and-so, and somebody had about 5 of these in layers. That was the basis of the humor. But they had a wonderful event on Sid Caesar's Hour, and I've talked to Sid about this before, since. Sid, incidentally, has made a marvelous comeback. He's in great health and a great performer. He doesn't do television anymore, but he had a serious problem with chemicals ingested, you know, prescription drugs and alcohol, and he wrote a book about it called "Where Have I Been?" And it was wonderful, about a decade where he was out of it, but he's now back on track and doing well. But to show you the kind of a guy he was in those days, they had a scene, a court scene, where he was a lawyer like Clarence Darrow, and Howie Morris was the defendant, and the jury foreman was supposed to say, and this again is live, you know, so he is supposed to say, "We find the defendant guilty." Between the dress and the show, I stayed through the dress rehearsal and everything, and I wasn't part of the skit. Went out to get a bite to eat, come back and do the show. And between the dress and the show, I thought they'd changed something, because on the air, the jury foreman, this bit part player, said, "Your Honor, we find the defendant not guilty." And Howie jumps up and says, "You hear that, Ma? I'm not guilty." Now, where do they go from here, you know? And Sid gets up as the defense attorney and says, "That's wrong, Your Honor. I think he's guilty." Now, that gets a laugh, and they ad-lib a situation there that made as though, I don't think the viewing audience ever knew anything was wrong. But immediately after that was over, Sid said to the director, he said, "Find that actor and tell him he's hired for next week." He said, "I'm afraid he'll harm himself." That's the kind of guy Sid was. He's a delightful man. But that's the kind of thing that happened in live television that you just don't see now, you know, with the safety of tape.